Underlying tensions in the family, Sarah Nguyen had always known that marrying into the Tran family would bring a unique set of challenges. The Trans were a well-established Asian American family, deeply rooted in their Californian suburb, and respected in both their local community and the broader Asian American network. Their home, a tastefully decorated two-story house, adorned with both modern American artwork and subtle nods to their heritage, represented decades of hard-won stability and assimilation. From the very beginning, Sarah sensed she was a newcomer, not just to their physical home, but to an entire world of unspoken expectations and traditions. Evelyn Tran, her mother-in-law, was the undisputed matriarch, a woman whose formidable presence quietly governed everything, from what meals were prepared at family gatherings to how birthdays were celebrated. Evelyn kept the house immaculate, taking pride in everything from the carefully set dining table to the well-manicured garden, expecting her family members to meet her standards without ever having to give explicit instructions. Despite her efforts to fit in, Sarah always felt like an outsider in Evelyn's eyes. She often questioned herself over the smallest things. Was she too informal in her language? Did she use the right brand of soy sauce in the stir-fry? Should she have accepted a second helping of rice when offered? Michael, her husband, tried to mediate, but in the invisible tug of war between his mother and wife, he acted more as an occasional buffer than a solution. Evelyn and Sarah's relationship was marked by a constant, simmering tension rather than outright conflict. For instance, if Sarah folded the laundry incorrectly, Evelyn would quietly refold the clothes without comment. If Sarah bought groceries, Evelyn would discreetly rearrange the fridge. Over time, Sarah learned to interpret the subtle critiques, a raised eyebrow, a gentle sigh, a dish that was quietly set aside during dinner. These interactions, though minor on the surface, accumulated into a persistent sense of unease for Sarah, as if she were always being silently judged. Other family members contributed to the undercurrents as well. Michael's younger sister, Emily, still living at home while finishing college, treated Sarah with polite detachment. Never overtly rude, but never warm either. At dinner, the conversation would sometimes slip into Vietnamese, a language Sarah only partly understood, leaving her feeling excluded, despite their best intentions to include her with translations. Sarah was keenly aware that she was both American enough for Michael's progressive outlook and, paradoxically, not American enough, according to Evelyn's deeply traditional standards. Family gatherings were especially stressful. Evelyn loved to host, inviting neighbors and relatives over for celebratory dinners or annual holiday parties. At these events, every detail was scrutinized, and Sarah found herself on edge, worried about how her actions would be perceived, not just by her in-laws, but by the wider circle of friends and family, whose approval seemed to matter so much to Evelyn. Sometimes, Sarah felt like she was performing a role, one she hadn't quite learned the script for. Despite her insecurities, Sarah worked hard to bond with the family. She took up gardening with Evelyn, hoping shared interests would help them connect, and volunteered to help with family traditions. But the gap between them remained, a gulf built on differences in upbringing, values, and unspoken family history. When little misunderstandings happened, for example, Sarah forgetting to serve tea before dessert, or mixing up a traditional ingredient, Evelyn's disappointment was palpable, even if hardly voiced. Michael, caught in the middle, would sometimes brush these moments off with a joke or a gentle word. But Sarah could sense his discomfort. The family's daily life continued on the surface, with friendly conversation and polite gestures. But beneath it all, quiet tensions ebbed and flowed, waiting, unseen, to surface at a more vulnerable moment. And so, as fall arrived and the Tran family began preparations for their big annual Thanksgiving celebration, Sarah found herself both hopeful and anxious, determined to finally earn her place, fully, genuinely, within the family, yet haunted by the sense that something, someday, might push these silent tensions into open conflict. The fateful incident. Autumn in the Tran household was always a season of hectic anticipation. Weeks before Thanksgiving, the family buzzed with preparations. Shopping lists grew long, invitations piled up, and every corner of the house was swept and polished to perfection. Sarah, eager to prove her dedication, volunteered to help with nearly every task, juggling grocery runs with recipe planning and helping Michael set up tables in the backyard for the largest gathering of the year. On the morning of the incident, the air was thick with excitement and a hint of anxiety. Sarah awoke early, determined not to miss a beat. She double-checked the catering order, arranged flowers Evelyn liked in the hallway vase, and carefully laid out the embroidered linens reserved for special occasions. Evelyn, commanding and efficient, issued instructions from the kitchen. Michael was busy prepping the grill with his father, while Emily fussed over decorations in the living room. The extended family began to arrive by midday, filling the house with laughter and the soft cacophony of multiple conversations. Sarah moved from group to group, carrying platters and sharing polite small talk, her nervous energy hidden beneath a practiced smile. By late afternoon, the family tradition of backyard games was in full swing. The youngest children darted around. Older relatives gathered on the patio with cups of tea, and the clatter of dishes and cutlery echoed from the open kitchen windows. Sarah joined in, referee for a chaotic game of touch football, her laughter momentarily genuine as she ran alongside Michael and Emily. The incident happened in a blink. One of the children, a lively 8-year-old niece named Chloe, chased after a rogue football. At the same time, Sarah was carrying a tray of glasses out onto the patio. In the ensuing confusion, children running, adults distracted, Sarah turning, just as Chloe darted past, there was a sudden, unmistakable crash. The tray tipped, glass scattered, and in the commotion, Chloe tripped and fell hard on the stone pathway. For a moment, silence seized the garden. Evelyn was the first to rush over, her face blanched with shock as she cradled her sobbing granddaughter. Blood from a cut on Chloe's forehead stained Evelyn's hands. Michael's father hurried to call 911, while Michael knelt beside Chloe, his words trembling as he tried to assess the injury. Panic spread quickly. The party scattered. Relatives exchanged worried glances, while some hurried to bring towels and ice packs. Sarah, frozen in place, felt everyone's gaze settle on her. Someone whispered,
Emily, are you ready
"Wasn't
to
she
talk now?
carrying the tray out
We are
there?"
here to help.
Evelyn shot Sarah a look of anguished accusation, and Sarah's heart dropped. She tried to explain, voice shaking, that she hadn't seen Chloe running, but her words felt thin against the rising tide of distress and blame. Chloe was taken to the hospital, the festive day now shadowed by anxiety and uncertainty. As the last car pulled away, the once cheerful house seemed impossibly still. Sarah replayed the incident in her mind on an endless loop, convinced she'd missed something vital. A warning, a shout, anything that might have prevented Chloe's fall. That night, as Michael consoled his family in the waiting room, Sarah sat apart, racked with guilt and fear.
Sarah.
She
Tell us what
overheard
you saw.
fragments of conversation, Emily's tearful recounting of the accident, Evelyn's lament about broken traditions,
Evelyn,
and Aunt's mutter
not American
that these
enough for you.
things never used to happen. Each whispered word added to the invisible weight bearing down on Sarah's chest. The next day, news from the
Good morning,
hospital
Evelyn.
confirmed everyone's fears. Chloe had suffered a concussion and would need monitoring for potential complications. Though her condition stabilized, the mood in the family darkened. No one openly blamed Sarah, but their strained politeness and careful avoidance made their feelings clear. Evelyn, usually measured in her disapproval, barely spoke to Sarah,
Just try to
except for the
understand.
briefest instructions. Emily, normally withdrawn, grew outright chilly, avoiding eye contact. Michael, torn between supporting his wife and comforting his family, grew quiet and distant. Sarah knew the accident would leave scars deeper than Chloe's wound. In a house where unspoken rules governed every interaction, she felt her place slipping further away. Her every move now subject to silent scrutiny. Her every word a potential misstep. The family's tender bonds, once merely frayed, now threatened to unravel completely. Just as the season's first chill settled over their home. Accusation and blame. The days following the accident moved with a strange heaviness, as if the Tran household itself sensed that something essential had fractured. Conversations turned clipped and practical, while the undercurrent of suspicion grew thicker with each passing moment. Sarah, acutely aware of every glance and murmur, carried the weight of the incident on her shoulders, a silent burden that grew heavier with each breath. Breakfasts, once accompanied by casual chatter,
I shouldn't have
now
done that.
dragged on in uneasy silence. Evelyn, who had always led the family with composed authority, moved through
We're
the
just trying to
house
help,
with a
Sarah.
stern determination
understand.
that left little room for comfort. Her eyes would meet Sarah's only briefly, with an inscrutable hardness that sent shivers up Sarah's spine. Even Michael, so often her confidant, seemed caught in a fog, torn between the roles of husband and son. It was on a gray Thursday evening, only 3 days after Chloe's fall, that the tension finally surfaced. The family had just finished dinner, plates were cleared, but no one moved to leave the table. Evelyn's hands, still and folded elegantly over her lap, betrayed a subtle tremor. The mood in the dining room was thick and nervous. "Sarah," Evelyn began, her voice measured but brittle. "I think we need to talk about what happened last weekend."
How long
Sarah
have you
felt
been
her
an
chest
investigator?
tighten and forced
It
herself to
varies.
meet Evelyn's eyes. She nodded, her hands clutching her napkin under the table. Michael looked between the two women, hesitating
It is
but
what it
not
is,
intervening.
right?
Other relatives, Michael's father, Emily, and even an uncle visiting from out of town, hovered at the edge of the conversation, their postures tense, their faces expectant. For the first time since the accident, the family focus was fixed squarely on Sarah. Evelyn continued, "It's clear
Make sure
we all
everything is
want what's
perfect
best for
and on
Chloe.
schedule.
She's lucky her injury wasn't worse, but we have to be honest about how this happened." Sarah's voice wavered as she replied, "I never saw her coming. I was only trying to bring the glasses outside." Evelyn interrupted,
Welcome, everyone.
her tone
So glad you
sharp
could make
yet
it.
contained. "Every year we do
wonderful to
this.
be here.
Every year the children play.
Good to see you
Everyone
again.
knows to be careful.
How
But this
lovely.
time, something changed. There was a pause, heavy and loaded. Emily, sitting across from Sarah, suddenly spoke up, her words trembling. "I saw you, Sarah. You look distracted. You should have known the kids were running around. An uncomfortable silence followed, punctuated by a few hurried, uneasy glances around the table. Other relatives began to chime in, gently at first, but their words gathered force. An aunt speculated that Sarah perhaps rushed because she wanted to prove herself. An uncle wondered aloud if Sarah had been careless with the tray. Every comment, no matter how veiled, circled around the same growing suspicion. Sarah's actions, whether intended or not, had led to Chloe's injury. Michael's father, a man of few words, tried to temper the conversation. "It was an accident," he said. "Let's not jump to conclusions." But the momentum had shifted. Decades of family loyalty, tradition, and accumulated anxieties rushed to the surface, framing Sarah as the outsider who had disrupted their fragile peace. Evelyn's final words closed the debate for the night. This family has always made the safety of the children our top priority. We can't just ignore carelessness and hope nothing worse happens in the future. Her gaze lingered on Sarah, the meaning clear without another word. Afterwards, Sarah sat in the dim hallway outside the dining room, heart racing, head spinning. She relived every second of the accident, searching for a moment where she could have acted differently. Anguish mixed with disbelief. How quickly trust had evaporated. How swiftly the family turned cold under the pressure of blame. For the first time, she realized that innocence was not enough. Perception and family power could warp the very shape of truth. As the night dragged on, Michael tried to comfort Sarah, but he was plainly torn. His reassurances thin, his affection now dulled by an uncertain loyalty. Sarah saw the agony in his eyes and knew the rift was growing. Upstairs, she could hear Evelyn speaking low and urgent to Michael's father, Emily sobbing quietly behind her door. By morning, the whispers had turned to conclusions. The declarations were quieter than outright accusation, but the damage was done. Sarah's place in the Tran family shifted from newcomer to scapegoat. Cast out from the family, Sarah awoke to the gray light of dawn filtering through the guest room curtains, a space that, though designated for visitors, had become her reluctant sanctuary over the past days. She had moved herself there after the tense family confrontation, sensing her presence in the master bedroom with Michael only deepened the rift within the family. The Tran house, usually lively with routine and overlapping footsteps, now seemed to hold its breath around her. In her mind, every sound, a door shutting, the creak of stairs, the faint murmur of Vietnamese through the walls, could be about her. Another discussion, another judgment. She braced herself for the day ahead and ventured to the kitchen for coffee, afraid of what might greet her. Evelyn was already there, her back straight as she poured boiling water into a teapot with meticulous care. She didn't look up. The only acknowledgement was a pretense of accidental silence. Sarah wished she could disappear, swallowed by the marble floor. She cleared her throat softly, but words, apologies, defenses, pleas, caught like thorns in her mouth.
Not quite.
Michael, usually quick to smooth over tensions, was nowhere to be seen. Emily glanced up from her phone, looked quickly away, and retreated into silence. The weight of her forced isolation pressed harder each day. Chores that once offered distraction, watering plants, chopping vegetables, sorting laundry, now felt like trespasses. Every movement seemed to cross an invisible line, met with sidelong glances or subtle corrections. At dinner, if Sarah offered to set the table or serve food, Evelyn gently intercepted, as if asserting her claim to the rhythms of the house. Leftover tensions from the accident simmered beneath every interaction, never boiling over, but always there, palpable and persistent. The others never directly accused her again, but everything they left unsaid, their guarded tones, the half-finished sentences, spoke louder than any confrontation. Michael spent most evenings comforting Chloe at the hospital or managing logistics with his father. When he came home, exhaustion had drawn dark circles under his eyes. He tried to reassure Sarah with tired words. "It'll blow over, just give it time." But hope drained from him. More often, he slid quietly into bed, his hand reaching for hers, but never quite closing the distance. On the fifth night after the family's intervention, Sarah overheard a heated argument filtering down the hall. She recognized Evelyn's voice, sharp and resolute, and Michael's, desperate and pleading. "She can't stay here, Michael. Not after what's happened. The family needs space to heal. How do we look to everyone else? Keeping her under this roof." Sarah pressed her fist to her mouth to stifle a sob. The conversation etched itself into her mind, each word a splinter beneath her skin. She waited until the corridor fell quiet, then listened for the soft click of Michael's door. She considered marching in and confronting Evelyn herself, but knew it would only force an ultimatum she wasn't prepared to face. Not yet. The next morning, while Sarah was folding laundry in the guest room, Michael arrived with hollow eyes, holding a mug of coffee for her. She could see the strain written across his face. Every muscle seemed stretched by indecision. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tangled mass of socks and shirts. "Sarah, you know how Mom is," he started softly. "Once she decides, it's not easy to change her mind. She thinks it's best if we spend some time apart, at least for now. She's asking you to leave. I'm sorry." Sarah's first reaction was disbelief, as if he'd spoken a foreign tongue. Then came a rush of anger, so fierce she had to dig her nails into her palm to stay still. "You're asking me to leave? After everything? You know I would never—" Her voice broke, the flood of emotion stalling her words. He reached for her hand, but the gesture felt empty. "I don't want you to go, but if you don't, she'll make this worse for everyone. For Chloe, for me. I need space to take care of them, right now." A bitter smile twisted across Sarah's face. "So, it's for the family. I wonder if I ever really counted as part of that." Neither one spoke for a long moment. Michael's silence said what he couldn't bear to utter aloud. An apology, a helplessness, maybe even relief at not having to fight any longer. Sarah began to pack her bags in the late morning haze. Each object seemed impossibly personal now. Every sweater, every pair of earrings, every book she'd brought to blend her own world with theirs. With shaking fingers, she slipped her wedding ring into her jewelry bag, unsure if she'd have the courage to put it back on again. Her departure was swift and unceremonious. Evelyn watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, mouth set in a straight line. Emily lingered by the stairs, avoiding eye contact, torn between guilt and relief. Michael followed her to the car in silence, loaded her suitcase in the trunk, then stood with his hands jammed in his pockets, eyes red-rimmed and downcast. "Call me, please," Michael managed when she paused at the car door. "I want to make this right. For us." Sarah nodded but couldn't speak. She was afraid if she opened her mouth, her anger would burst forth and scorch everything left unsaid. Instead, she slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without looking back. Only, when she reached the freeway, miles of concrete unfurling before her, the city skyline washed gold by the afternoon sun. Did she allow herself to cry, releasing days of humiliation, anger, and raw heartbreak? She drove aimlessly for hours, unable to decide where to go. Her own parents' home was states away. A handful of friends had offered support, but how could she explain all she was feeling? The shame, the accusation, the bitter taste of betrayal from the people she'd tried so hard to love. She checked into a small motel on the edge of the city. The beige walls and humming air conditioner, a far cry from the Tran home's warmth and bustle. Alone with her thoughts, Sarah replayed every moment leading to her exile. Doubt gnawed at her. Could she have prevented Chloe's accident if she'd moved slower, spoken up, looked twice? Or was she simply the convenient scapegoat for a wound the family couldn't admit was nobody's fault? She made a silent vow. She would not allow herself to be crushed by injustice or haunted by self-blame. If the Tran family wanted to cast her out for their own peace of mind, so be it. But she would seek to clear her name, if only to remind herself, at her very core, that she was not what they feared her to be. The night was restless. Sarah stared up at the spinning ceiling fan,
Good to see you again.
her eyes puffy and mind
Lovely.
racing. In her darkest hour, a stubborn hope flickered. She would not let this be the end of her story. Justice meant facing discomfort, confronting buried truths, and, above all, refusing to simply disappear when it would be easier to give in. The storm of the day had passed, but the fight for her dignity, and perhaps the family's redemption, was only just beginning. Seeking justice. Sarah woke to a thin band of sunlight streaming through the cheap motel curtains and stared at the ceiling for a long time before finding the will to move. Her body felt heavy, as if the loneliness and anger of the past days had anchored her to the faded sheets. Over the previous 24 hours, she'd cycled through denial, self-pity, and rage, sometimes looping back through all three, with every replay of Chloe's accident in her mind. But this morning, as the hum of city traffic seeped through the walls, something steely formed in her gut. She could not, would not, let her story end like this. The injustice clawed at her. She had been condemned not just by circumstance, but by people she had tried desperately to love. If she accepted blame, she would be giving Evelyn, Emily, and all the family the power to write her completely out of their lives. It was time to reclaim her narrative. The first hours were the hardest. She scribbled lists on motel stationery, tossing the pen aside only to force herself to try again. How did everything unravel? What had she missed? Who, if anyone, had actually seen what happened? Beyond the panicked accusations swirling after the fact, she made columns: family members, guests, the sequence of events, possible motives. The pattern was frustratingly murky. Sarah knew she needed help. She couldn't refute a family's tightly woven story alone, especially when her own memory was blurred by panic and guilt. She started with the few friends she could trust, reaching out to Anna, her former roommate and a local journalist, whose curiosity was legendary. "I need to prove I wasn't at fault," she said over the phone, her voice trembling as much from vulnerability as determination. "I just don't know where to start." Anna wasted no time. "You need statements, details, maybe even surveillance footage if anyone had a phone out. Not all accidents are as simple as they look," she said. "And don't forget, the family's version isn't the only one. I'll help you gather testimony, and if you need it, I can get you in touch with my cousin, Tessa. She's a PI." Encouraged by the offer, Sarah took her first step that day, retracing the accident in her mind as she drove to a local coffee shop to meet Anna. They sat in the corner, laptops out, outlining the possible sources of information. Anna offered to reach out, discreetly, to some of the neighbors and recurring guests common to Tran family gatherings. If anyone had noticed anomalies or tensions before the accident, now was the time to hear it. Sarah herself called a handful of relatives, forcing herself to set aside pride in favor of clarity. Conversations were awkward. Some family members avoided her outright, sending her to voicemail. Others answered, their voices thin with discomfort, but less hostile than she'd feared. I just can't get involved, Sarah. It's not my place, one aunt murmured, barely above a whisper. Nothing she gathered was enough to clear her. But Sarah began to sense undercurrents in the family's narrative. Emily, the one who had most directly accused her, had seemed more nervous than righteous during the confrontation. When Anna and Tessa dug a little deeper, they discovered Emily had slipped out for a call before the accident, re-entering the backyard only seconds before Chloe fell. The timeline shifted with each conversation. Guilt, shame, and hidden dynamics were everywhere. Sarah redoubled her efforts. With Tessa's guidance, she reconstructed the party scene. Photos from relatives' Instagram stories gave timestamps to the day. Smiling children at play, adults clustered around appetizers, a close-up of the tray Sarah carried. In one blurry background, Sarah spotted a crucial detail. Emily, apparently distracted and tapping at her phone, close to where Chloe had been darting about only minutes before the accident. The breakthrough came when Anna managed to persuade one of the family friends, Lucas, to meet Sarah for coffee. Lucas had always gotten along with Sarah and Michael. He remembered the day clearly. It all happened so fast, Lucas said. But honestly, I think the kids were playing way too close to that stone pathway. When Chloe fell, I looked up, and Emily was the one closest, not you. She shouted. Maybe she was trying to warn Chloe. I don't know. But she looked terrified. A tray or no tray, some adult should have moved the game away. But everyone was distracted. Sarah's mind whirred as she recalled the moments, the shouts, the sudden silence, the blame that swiftly landed on her. Why hadn't Emily spoken up earlier? Why had she quietly let her sister-in-law bear it all? Tessa suggested reviewing the texts and social media posts sent throughout the day. Through Anna's network, they found that Emily had sent frantic texts to a friend right after the accident. Chloe ran too fast. I tried to stop her, but it was already too late. I feel so sick. Other texts revealed Emily's guilt at not paying better attention when she should have been watching her niece. Piece by piece, the mosaic came together. The accident, Sarah's peripheral involvement, and the powerful, yet hidden currents of fear and shame that had led the family to close ranks and make her a scapegoat. The evidence wasn't yet fully exculpatory, but at last, it raised enough doubt about Sarah's guilt. Yet Sarah would need more than doubts if she truly wished to confront Evelyn and reclaim her place, if she even wanted it. For now, what mattered was that she had begun to believe in her own innocence again. Freed from the crushing grip of self-doubt, she ended that day exhausted, but stronger. Alone in her motel room, Sarah looked in the mirror, brushing hair back from her face. The anger hadn't left her, but it had changed shape. She no longer felt like a victim waiting for rescue.
Good morning, Evelyn.
She was a woman sharpening herself for a fight, unwilling to let her name be tarnished by convenience or cowardice. The next step would be the most painful. Facing Emily, demanding long overdue honesty. and preparing herself to return to the Tran household, not as a supplicant, but as someone who deserved and would claim justice. Her
Just
phone
try to
buzzed with a
understand.
new message from Tessa. Emily agreed to meet. She's scared, but willing to talk. Tomorrow work for you? Sarah smiled for the first time in days. The fight was only beginning, but now she had hope. And something even more dangerous. She had resolve. Unveiling secrets. Sarah sat in the bustling cafe, hands wrapped tightly around a lukewarm mug, her mind racing with a torrent of questions and worst-case scenarios. The morning sun filtered through fogged windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the light. A strange contrast to the gravity pressing down on her. Today, she would confront Emily, her sister-in-law, in a conversation that had the potential to upend not only her own fate, but also the fragile equilibrium of the entire Tran family. Emily arrived late, eyes ringed with exhaustion, hair swept hastily into a ponytail. She slid wordlessly into the seat across from Sarah, fiddling with her phone, her posture tense. Neither woman spoke for a long moment. Only the clatter of coffee cups and low hum of conversation filled the gap. Sarah finally inhaled, steadying herself. "Thank you for agreeing to meet,"
We're just
she
trying to
said
help,
gently.
Sarah.
Emily kept her gaze down. "Tessa said I should talk to you. I'm not sure what good it'll do." Sarah chose her words with care. "I don't want to threaten anyone. I just want the truth. Please, Emily, help me understand what really happened that day." There was another pause, thick with years of unspoken worries. Emily's lips trembled. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Tears glittered in her eyes, and she looked away, blinking rapidly. Sarah pressed on, her voice steady but kind. "You know I didn't trip, Chloe. I need you to tell me what you saw, not what anyone expects you to say." Emily exhaled shakily. "I was on my phone. I didn't know the kids had started playing so close to the stone steps." Chloe darted out before I could stop her. "I dropped everything and tried to warn her. I wasn't even watching you. When I looked up after the crash, everyone was staring at you. And I just froze."
It is what it
She let
is,
out a
right?
choked, guilty laugh. "I'm sorry. I should have said something. But Mom looked so angry, and I was scared she'd blame me. She always does." The admission hung painfully in the space between them. For a moment, all the suspicion and hurt Sarah had carried crystallized into something sharp but strangely liberating. She realized she was not alone in her fear of Evelyn's judgment. The entire family was shaped by it. A wave of questions surged up inside her, and she gently asked, "Emily, has this happened before? Has anyone else been blamed for things they didn't do?" Emily hesitated, shoulders collapsing. "It's always been like this.
You too.
Mom doesn't like losing control. If anything bad happens, she has to have someone to blame, or she can't deal with it. When I was 12, she accused me of breaking her jade necklace. Even though I didn't, she screamed at me, and it took months before she'd speak to me normally again." Dad just kept his head down. Michael always tried to smooth things over, but it's exhausting for all of us. A gust of empathy swept through Sarah, mingled with anger. "So, you let her decide the story about Chloe too?" Emily nodded miserably. "It felt safer. The fact that you're not Mom's daughter made it so much easier. She's always treated Michael's partners with suspicion, and you're the first who stood your ground. I thought if I kept quiet, the storm would pass faster." Emily's voice shook. But it didn't. It just got worse. A long silence fell between them. Sarah turned over the implications. If Emily had been a silent witness because of fear, how many other secrets festered in the Tran family? unspoken and toxic. She reached for her phone, found Anna's number, and sent a quick text. Emily's talking. She confirms the real story. Ask if any other relatives remember family conflicts. The response was immediate. On it, we'll dig through everyone's socials, old family posts, party photos, whatever's available. Emily seemed startled by Sarah's confidence. What are you going to do? She whispered. I'm going to clear my name, Sarah replied. But I'm also going to force the truth out. No more hiding. You deserve better too. In the following days, Sarah and Anna intensified their search for corroborating details. They found cousin Min, who remembered seeing Emily nearly drop her phone in panic just as Chloe fell. Emily shouted before we knew what happened. She was closest to Chloe, Min told Anna in a late-night phone call. Honestly, I was surprised when everyone blamed you, but you're new, and Evelyn doesn't take risks with her own. Digging further, Anna uncovered more. Past social media archives revealed patterns. Birthdays ruined by arguments. Relatives quietly drifting away after disagreements. Subtle insults embedded in captions and comments. Old family friends remembered rumors. A cousin banished after accidentally backing into Evelyn's prized rosebush. A sister-in-law who vanished from family gatherings after an incident never discussed. The more Sarah pieced together, the more the picture clarified. This was not an isolated lapse, but a long-standing family pattern. Evelyn, out of fear or pain or the ingrained trauma of her own past, required a scapegoat whenever perfection cracked. Michael's silence, Emily's avoidance, even the father's weary acquiescence, all were defense mechanisms in an ecosystem governed by fear. One evening, Emily messaged Sarah. I told Dad what really happened. He said he always knew something was off, but didn't want to disrupt the family more. I'm scared what Mom will say, but it's time. Sarah stared at the message for a long time. She felt a flicker of admiration for Emily's courage and a surge of anxiety for her own next confrontation. Anna sent another update. Tracked down the old housekeeper, Mrs. Ngo. She remembered when Evelyn accused her of stealing heirloom silverware that was later found in a box Michael had misplaced. Instead of apologizing, Evelyn cut her hours until she eventually quit. She said she always felt like she was on thin ice. Armed now with testimony, digital traces, and a growing circle of support, Sarah realized her fight was as much for justice as for healing. She drafted a letter, equal parts confession and challenge, addressed to Evelyn, but meant for the entire family. In it, she recounted the specifics of the day, Emily's admission, and decades of buried fear and resentment collected from the Tran household. She offered a choice: face the truth and heal, or keep hiding and let the family fall apart. Nervously, she forwarded drafts to Emily and Anna. Both responded quickly. You're braver than you know. I'll back you up, Emily wrote. Anna sent a thumbs up in the simple words, truth brings freedom, even if it hurts first. As Sarah sealed the letter and prepared for the conversation she'd always dreaded but could no longer avoid, she realized something had shifted inside her. She was not returning as a supplicant, not begging for acceptance. This was about reclamation, not just of her name, but of a future safe from fear and manipulation. For the first time in weeks, she felt clarity and a sense of agency, a new secret of her own, that even in the darkest family storms, courage can ignite transformation. The secrets of the Tran family had been buried for years, layered beneath rituals and routines, silent, corrosive, and inescapable. Now, for the first time, The truth was rising to the surface. The truth, unveiled, Sarah stood by her motel window in the pale morning light, letter clutched in her trembling hands. The previous night, she'd barely slept. Every time her eyes closed, new anxieties surfaced. Would anyone in the Tran family even listen? Would her evidence be enough? Or would this turn into just another story, swept under the thick rug of family history? The truth suffocated in layers of denial. Her phone vibrated shortly after sunrise. Emily. The day dragged by in anxious increments. Sarah reviewed every file Anna and Tessa had helped her build. Transcripts of interviews, streams of texts, filtered photos, screenshots of posts and comments, statements from cousins, even Mrs. Ngo's recollection of the missing silverware. At the heart of it all was Emily's confession, a quiet, pivotal admission of guilt and fear. And, Sarah now realized, a map of unspoken resentments stretching back through years of family gatherings. Twilight set the sky aglow when Sarah drove slowly to the Tran home. The neighborhood was familiar, but felt strangely foreign tonight, every shadow stretching long and heavy. She stopped at the curb and took one slow breath after another,
Good morning, Evelyn.
grounding herself in the pulse of her resolve. Inside, the house was silent, almost ceremonial in its tension. Evelyn sat at one end of the dining table, perfectly composed, but as hard and impenetrable as stone. Michael's father, usually an inscrutable, unobtrusive presence, stood silently behind his wife's chair, hands
Just try to
folded.
understand.
Michael and Emily lingered nearby, their faces threaded with warring emotions: guilt, hope, anticipation, anxiety. Even Chloe, home from the hospital and bandaged but alert, sat beside her mother, blinking wide eyes at the grown-ups as if sensing their stormy mood. Sarah took her seat. She pulled the letter from her purse, placing it neatly on the center of the table. "Thank you for letting me come," she began, voice strong in spite of her quivering hands. "I think it's time we stop hiding from the truth. Not just about the accident, about all of it." Evelyn's lips tightened. "I hope you know this is very difficult for the family," she said coolly. "We've been through enough." Sarah held the older woman's gaze. "But if we can't be honest, nothing will get better," she replied. "Emily, perhaps you should begin." The room seemed to contract with suspense. Emily's hands shook, but she cleared her throat. "Mom," she began softly, "I have something to say. What happened to Chloe? It wasn't Sarah's fault. I should have been watching her, but I got distracted with my phone.
I shouldn't have
I
done
tried
that.
to warn her, but she was too quick. When the crash happened, I panicked. I let everyone blame Sarah because it was
We're just
easier.
trying to help, Sarah.
I was scared.
I understand.
I've been scared of disappointing you for years." Silence followed, brittle as glass. Michael squeezed Emily's shoulder with gratitude, but didn't say anything. Even Michael's father looked surprised, as if he'd never expected his daughter to step into the light and speak so plainly. Sarah slid dossiers toward the center of the table. "These are statements from people who saw what happened, as well as examples from the past. Moments where blame was used to protect the family's image, but not the truth. I don't intend to hurt anyone, but I won't be the scapegoat for something I didn't do. I know it's not just about me. There have been others. Mrs. Ngo, Min, even Emily. This has to stop." The moment broke Evelyn's composure. Her cheeks flared, her jaw working silently. "You're trying to turn my own children against me?" she snapped. But beneath the anger lay something else. A
It is
flicker
what it
of
is,
fear,
right?
or was it pain? I'm asking you to see us, Emily persisted, tears fighting free. Every time something goes wrong, even a mistake, it's a threat to you, to everything you've worked for. But Mom, it's hurting us. It's made us afraid of you. I was so scared of your anger. I almost let Sarah's life be ruined. Evelyn's voice faltered. Her hands gripped the table edge. You don't know what it was like for me. For years, I was the outsider. I was blamed for anything that went wrong in my own mother-in-law's house. I promised myself I'd have control in my own family. I never wanted to be weak again. The revelation left the room stunned. Sarah suddenly glimpsed not just a matriarch clinging to authority, but a woman shaped by wounds never spoken of. But she steeled herself and met Evelyn's eyes. Having control doesn't mean never being wrong. It means learning to forgive, to share both blame and love. Tears slipped down Evelyn's face then, breaking through the years of discipline. I thought if the family looked perfect, none of you would ever have to feel ashamed, like I did. Michael reached for his mother's hand, voice gentler than Sarah expected. Mom, we were never ashamed of you, and we've all made mistakes. We just want to be able to tell the truth without being afraid. The temperature in the room changed, no longer icy and brittle, but raw and almost tender. Emily sniffled, nodding, and finally Michael's father spoke. It's time to stop turning against each other. Chloe, small voice piping up, said, I fell. Nobody made me do it. Her simple words pulled laughter from the room, breaking the tension as if she alone understood what mattered most. There was still so much unsaid, but the air felt lighter than it had in weeks. The secrets that had fueled the family's storm, the history of blame, the old wounds, the desperate need for control were now out in the open. No more whispered accusations, no more exile. For the first time, Sarah saw the possibility of true healing. Evelyn wiped her eyes and nodded, a silent promise. I will try, she whispered. I can't promise to change overnight, but I'll try to listen. The circle closed around the table. Apologies were spoken, imperfect, tentative, but real. Sarah stayed late into the evening, listening, sometimes speaking, but mostly bearing witness to the power of truth, how it can wound, but also transform. When she finally left for the night, Evelyn walked her out, hugged her stiffly, but with meaning, and said, Thank you for not giving up on us. Sarah stepped outside, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The Tran house glowed behind her. For once, the light felt welcoming. She understood the long arc of healing had only just begun. But finally, the silence was broken, and the truth, once buried, was allowed its place at the table. Confrontation and vindication. Sarah's hands trembled as she prepared for the evening that would either restore her honor or deepen already painful wounds. She'd spent the day replaying Emily's confession, drawing strength from family testimonies, Instagram screenshots, and the courage it had taken for so many, especially Emily and her father, to break a silence maintained for generations. This time, Sarah was not coming to the Trans as merely an accused outsider. She was returning as a woman armed with truth, evidence, and the moral authority earned by surviving the worst the household's traditions could inflict. As twilight spread across the sky, Sarah pulled into the Tran family driveway. The house was alive with tension. Lights glowed behind drawn blinds. Every curtain seemed to flutter with anticipation.
Well, take your eyes off it.
Every window a silent witness to the drama about to unfold. When she opened the front door, she felt the eyes of several relatives sweep over her, some with sympathy, others with reserve, but all anxious for the truth to surface. Tonight was not simply a family meeting. Evelyn had agreed, at Michael's father's urging, to invite the wider family.
Not quite.
Uncles, aunts, a cousin or two who'd grown distant after witnessing the Tran family's pattern of blame and exclusion. They gathered in the living room, as if called to a tribunal, each equally uncertain whether what was about to happen would heal or tear further at already fragile bonds. Michael greeted Sarah quietly near the entryway, handing her a cup of tea she dared not drink.
Help right away. It's an
"I'm with
emergency."
you," he whispered. Sarah offered him a grateful, nervous smile.
What happened here?
They shared a
No, what is
moment
it?
of unity she had thought forever lost. Just before Evelyn entered the room, Sarah felt her pulse steady. Emily, pale but determined, took a seat facing her mother and the assembled relatives. Even Chloe, recovered and now giggling on the couch with her favorite uncle, seemed to sense the gravity of the evening.
We are here.
Evelyn's entrance hushed the room.
Oh, it hurts.
The formidable matriarch, her hair pulled tight, eyes glimmering with fatigue and fear, was, for the first time, not fully in control. Michael's father spoke first, his voice unflinching. "Tonight, we confront what has divided this
Our
family.
traditions.
We hear
They
the
are
truth,
broken now.
not for pride or appearances, but for healing." Sarah
I told
rose
you everything. I
and,
don't know what else you
hands
want from me.
only slightly shaking, delivered the letter she'd written days before. In it, she outlined the chain of events: the accident, the split-second confusion, Emily's fear-driven
listen.
silence, and the burden Sarah had carried alone. She laid out the evidence: the eyewitness testimonies, digital records from Anna and Tessa, and Emily's own confession. Each statement corroborated the
Emily, are you
tragic
ready to talk now?
randomness of Chloe's
We are
fall
here to help you.
and exposed an uncomfortable family reality. Blame had long been weaponized to maintain an illusion of perfection. With the family's eyes on her, Sarah addressed them, not in self-pity, but with grave humility. "I loved all of you enough to want to belong here, but belonging doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It comes from telling the truth, even when it's hard. I have carried the weight of this accident because it was easier for you to believe an outsider failed you than to face your own fears and old wounds. But tonight, for my sake, and for every person who has ever felt accused, ignored, or exiled, I ask that we look honestly at what
know you were
happened
there, Sarah.
and what we want
Tell
to
us what
become."
you saw.
Evelyn, face drawn, regarded the room coolly. "We all have our ways of coping.
Evelyn,
I did
I'm
what I
not
thought
American enough
best
for you.
for this family. But if the truth is what's needed, let it come forward." With a trembling voice, but growing confidence, Emily broke the silence.
good morning, Evelyn.
She repeated her admission, this time in front of the entire family. "I was distracted. I saw Chloe run. I tried to call out. I was closest, not Sarah. When the accident happened, Mom's anger terrified me. I let Sarah take the blame because I was scared I'd lose your approval again. I'm sorry." She turned pointedly to her
Just
mother.
try to understand.
"It wasn't fair." Others, emboldened, spoke in turn. Min described how blame had once driven him away. Aunt Huang recounted a birthday where she'd been humiliated in front of relatives for an innocent mistake. The ex-housekeeper's written testimony was read aloud, her story echoing across decades. The room grew heavier as each tale surfaced, painful, honest, and irreducible to a single scapegoat. But as collective burdens took shape, they grew lighter in the telling. Gradually, fear gave way to understanding. Evelyn's defenses fractured with each new voice. Her chin quivered as she met Sarah's gaze. "I was blamed for everything in my own youth," she admitted, voice thick with emotion. "I swore I wouldn't let chaos break my family, and in doing so, I repeated the cycle. I shamed people I loved, thinking I protected them." Tears blurred her eyes, pride bleeding into genuine regret. "Sarah, if I could take back what I said, I would. I see now what I refused to see. My
shouldn't
wound
have done
became
that.
yours. Please forgive me." Sarah felt a wave of relief and sadness crash over her. Relief
trying
that
to
the
help,
truth was
Sarah.
free,
I understand.
sorrow for the unnecessary pain. She approached Evelyn, tears streaming down her own face. What happened to Chloe was an accident, a tragedy, not a crime. "I forgive you, but I hope we can forgive ourselves too, for mistakes we made in fear." One by one, apologies and acknowledgments circled the room, not just to Sarah, but from family members to one another. Michael embraced Emily and Sarah. Evelyn let herself be held. Uncle Bao, always quiet, shared an old grievance and was met not with scorn, but with acceptance. The room became less like a courtroom and more like a group recovering from a shared trauma. Each voice, for once, allowed its dignity and truth. Sarah understood
How
now
long have you been an
that
investigator?
vindication wasn't a single
varies.
shining moment of being proven right. It was the gradual tearing down of fear, the building up of trust in its place.
It is what it is.
Justice
right?
was not revenge or humiliation, but the return of compassion to a family long governed by appearances. Late that night, after most of the guests had quietly gone, Sarah lingered in the living room. Evelyn sat beside her, and for the first time, they spoke as equals. Not
Make sure everything
adversaries
is
bound
perfect
by
and on
tradition,
schedule.
but women wrestling with the desire to belong and be believed. "I don't know if I can change overnight," Evelyn whispered. When Sarah stepped out into the cool air finally, she felt the weight that had bent her
Welcome,
for
everyone.
weeks
So glad
begin
you
to
could make
lift.
it.
The Tran house,
Oh, it's
lit,
wonderful to be here.
imperfect, but resilient,
Good to see you again.
now held a space
too.
for honesty.
How lovely.
Even if the work of healing would take time, Sarah hadn't simply cleared her name. She had taken the family's pain, named it, and returned it with forgiveness and hope. She didn't know exactly what her future here would be, but she knew, at last, she no longer walked alone. Reconciliation and forgiveness for the first time in weeks, Sarah found herself walking up the Tran family's front path with something like hope blossoming in her chest. The drama and pain of the past month weighed on her, but it was joined now by an unfamiliar lightness, a sense that reconciliation, however tentative, was no longer an unattainable dream. She paused at the entrance, hand resting on the carved door, collecting her thoughts before stepping inside. The house, once a landscape of quiet hostility and tension, felt subtly transformed. The familiar scent of jasmine
what happened
tea
here?
drifted through the air.
We need to get you
Windows
help
were
now.
cracked open to let in soft September sun,
We need to find supplies.
and the living
nothing
room
left.
was bustling
go.
with gentle activity. It was Evelyn who greeted her first, not with icy reserve as before, but with a slow, halting smile.
Wasn't she getting
Though the
tray?
air was still tinged with caution, it was a vast improvement from the silent stares and closed doors of recent weeks. "Sarah, will you join us?"
I didn't mean
Evelyn
for any
asked,
of this to happen.
voice careful but genuine. We're about to have tea." Sarah nodded and entered, her heart pounding. Michael waited in the kitchen, pouring steaming water and glancing up at her with relief and apology in his expression. Emily was already at the dining table, shuffling cards absent-mindedly, her penitent resolve visible in her lowered gaze. They all sat together,
told him to
the
look.
soft clink of china punctuating
him.
the first few moments of awkwardness. It was Evelyn
We
who
have
broke the
broken
silence.
traditions. I
Sarah,
don't know if we can
I know
ever go
words
back.
can't erase what happened, but I want to try to say what I have held
These
back
things
all
never
this
used to
time.
happen.
Her hands trembled faintly as she spoke. I was wrong. I let my fear of losing control hurt all of you, most especially you. I blamed you, when really the fault belonged to none of us. The accident was just that, an accident. Her eyes glimmered with tears. I am deeply sorry. Sarah steadied herself, feeling the enormity of the moment. She had imagined apologies before, but never expected them to come with so much vulnerability. Thank you for saying that, Evelyn. I know it wasn't easy. I also made mistakes. I should have spoken up earlier or asked for help. Instead of trying to handle everything alone, she looked from Michael to Emily. We all did what we thought was right at the time. But I think we can do better now. Michael reached over, taking Sarah's hand in his. I should have stood by you sooner. I let myself be pulled apart by loyalty to two worlds. I'm sorry for not fighting harder. For you. For us. Emily's voice joined in, low but sincere. I was afraid. I let Mom's anger decide the truth when I should have spoken out. Every day since, I've regretted it. I hope someday you'll forgive me and trust me again. Sarah
Take your
felt a
eyes off
wave
it.
of warmth and relief, the beginnings of old wounds knitting closed. I forgive you. I forgive all of you. What happened to Chloe could have happened to any of us. What hurts more is silence and suspicion, not imperfection. Just then, Michael's father, who had often hovered in the shadow of family conflict, pulled up a chair. I want my children to learn from my mistakes as well,
Not quite.
he said quietly. All those years, I thought the best way to keep peace was to keep quiet. Now I see that silence let the rot grow. I am sorry for not listening, for not stepping in when you needed me to. Sarah offered a gentle smile. Change is hard for everyone, Uncle. Sometimes the bravest thing we do is to begin again.
Yes,
The
I need
words
help
opened
right
the
away.
door
It's an
to a more
emergency.
honest dialogue. Instead of skirting around the
Is
past,
everyone all right?
the family took turns recounting
Oh, no,
how
what
they
is
had
it?
felt during the weeks of suspicion and blame. Laughter mixed with tears as old grievances surfaced, not in anger, but as confessions finally safe to share. Emily spoke of her childhood longing for approval. Michael remembered his frustration, always being a mediator
We
and
need
never
help.
feeling free.
Chloe is hurt.
Even Evelyn
Don't worry,
confessed
we are
to
here.
lonely, sleepless nights,
Oh, it hurts.
spent fearing she had ruined the very family she tried so hard to protect. It was Chloe, bouncing energetically into the room with a crayon drawing in hand, who supplied the purest moment of healing. Look, it's all of us, she said,
Our traditions,
holding up a picture
they are broken
in which
now.
every family member, arms linked, stood beneath a bright
I told
sun.
you everything. I don't
No
know
one
what
is
else you
mad
want from me.
anymore. Laughter bubbled up. Real, unstrained laughter. Sarah found herself being swept up, hugging Chloe, marveling at the wisdom of children. No one's mad
Just
anymore,
listen.
sweetie, she promised. And for the first time, she believed it. As the afternoon drifted toward evening, the family discussed practical ways to strengthen their bonds. Michael suggested more open conversations
So, Emily, are you ready
and
to
regular
talk now?
family meetings
We are here
where
to help
everyone,
you.
regardless of age,
I want to go
could
home.
share their feelings honestly. Evelyn promised to work on listening, to trust rather than control. Emily, emboldened by the support around her, offered to coordinate family activities that would allow for participation, not just perfection. Sarah realized that true forgiveness wasn't a single act or a dramatic pronouncement, but an ongoing, everyday practice, a commitment to compassion, understanding, and patience. She would have to adjust her expectations, just as the Trans would have to challenge their old habits. But she felt certain it was possible. They all sat down for dinner, this time with the table full
We know you
and
were there,
conversation
Sarah.
flowing freely.
Tell us what you
Evelyn included Sarah
Why?
in the ritual of serving food.
saw. I don't know.
Michael and Emily worked side by side, setting water
Evelyn,
glasses and fetching extra
I'm not American
napkins.
enough for you.
The atmosphere no longer charged with tension, but with the comfortable chaos of family. The once cold and closed-off dining room now felt
Good
like a
morning,
place
Evelyn.
where transformation was truly unfolding. Late that night, as the others dispersed, Evelyn and Sarah lingered over dishes in the kitchen. The older woman cleared her throat. "Thank you for not giving up on us, Sarah. Not many would have fought to come back." Sarah smiled, feeling strength surge within her. "We're family. That's what family does." As she stepped outside
Just try
under
to
the early
understand.
autumn stars, Sarah breathed deeply, her spirit finally at peace. The path to forgiveness and reconciliation had been steep, but it led to a place richer and more hopeful than she had ever dared imagine. The Tran family, once closed off by secrets and pride, had found a fragile unity, a promise of future resilience, built on truth, apology, and love, a new beginning. The late September air was crisp but gentle as Sarah stood alone on the front porch, suitcase at her feet. The Tran house glowed softly behind her, yellow light spilling from the windows out onto the familiar path where so many moments, painful, hopeful, life-changing, had taken place. She was leaving, but there was no sense of exile this time. Instead, a deep calm had settled within her, and every step away felt more like a step forward than a retreat. Inside, the family moved in quiet harmony, their routines newly reshaped. The painful spectacle of accusation and division had finally given way to a household
shouldn't have done
alive
that.
with second chances. That morning, Evelyn had hugged Sarah with a tightness and sincerity
We're just trying to
never
help,
shown
Sarah.
before,
I understand.
whispering, "Whatever you decide, you'll always have a place here." Michael, head bowed but face calm, had told her honestly, "We'll be okay, no matter what happens next." Even Emily had squeezed Sarah's hand before dashing off to class, promising an overdue catch-up over coffee soon. Sarah's decision to leave for a while, to travel, to visit her own family, to simply be on her own, was not about giving up or running away. The painful journey of the past months had reshaped her perspective
Chuyện đó có
in
xảy ra
ways
với bạn không?
she couldn't have imagined. Reconciliation with the Trans had not meant returning to blind trust or papering over old wounds. It meant truly seeing each other, owning past mistakes, and daring to envision a future not bound by ancient fears. She loaded her suitcase into the car with a sense of completion. The house itself was transformed too.
It is what it is.
Laughter
right?
drifted through the windows, joined by the clatter of dishes and the warm smell of homemade dinner. Sarah allowed herself a moment to take it all in. She could almost hear Chloe giggle as Michael recounted her wild stories, or Evelyn's gentle instructions as Emily chattered about her upcoming final exams. Peace, though delicate,
Make sure
felt
everything is
real.
perfect
Her
and
own
on
sense of
schedule.
belonging had evolved. She was no longer the anxious outsider, desperate for acceptance. The trials she had survived, and the truth she'd insisted on confronting, had granted her something more valuable: self-respect
Welcome, everyone.
and
I'm
clarity.
so glad you could
She
make
knew,
it.
regardless of where she lived or what came next, she was part of a family knit together
Good to see
by
you again.
honesty,
You too.
not fear.
How lovely.
As she drove through the winding streets of the neighborhood, memories flickered by. Sundays in the garden, awkward first dinners, nights where she'd felt nearly invisible, evenings of shared frustration softened by Michael's humor. Each memory was colored by both ache and affection. The greater arc, Sarah realized, was not one of victimhood, but transformation. She spent her first nights away at a quiet inn by the coast, letting the rhythm of the waves soothe her restless mind. She called her own parents, sharing stories of renewal, and found herself laughing in a way she hadn't in years. She journaled for hours, mapping not only the pain, but also the growth, the courage she'd found, the empathy she'd built, the understanding that had finally bridged cultures, generations, and hearts. Slowly, Sarah began to imagine new possibilities for her life. Perhaps she would return to school and finally pursue the psychology degree she'd delayed for so long. Maybe she'd write about her experience, helping others move through trauma and misunderstanding. Most likely, she would visit old friends and build fresh connections, ones founded in authenticity, not obligation. The future felt wide open, shimmering with choice. She kept in regular contact with the Trans. Michael called every evening, sometimes with news, sometimes just to hear her quiet breathing on the other end of the line. Evelyn sent photos of Chloe and Emily at family dinner, along with careful updates about the changes in the household. One message read, "I messed up the rice again. Next time, I'll use your recipe." Emily's texts arrived at odd hours, filled with self-deprecating humor and tentative plans, always ending with, "Miss you. Come visit soon." In time, Sarah felt ready to visit. The return was not grand, a simple family dinner, casual and unforced. There was still self-consciousness in the air, but it was tempered by mutual goodwill. Apologies were no longer the currency of every interaction. Now, laughter and honesty were enough. She watched as Michael and Evelyn negotiated kitchen duties without tension, as Emily chattered about her thesis, as Chloe insisted Sarah sit next to her at the table. The family developed small but meaningful new traditions. Once a week, they held a truth evening with tea, where everyone was encouraged to share not just grievances, but hopes and ideas. No interruptions allowed, only listening. Sarah was surprised to see how eagerly even Evelyn engaged, sharing stories from her own youth that revealed both her resilience and her vulnerabilities. Sarah noticed the transformation in Emily most keenly. Her sister-in-law, once timid and avoidant, began to express herself with newfound clarity. The secrets that had weighed down each member of the family melted away, replaced by directness and supportive gestures. Evelyn made a concerted effort to ask, not assume, what everyone needed, even laughing at herself when she fell back into old habits. Michael, freed from his permanent role as mediator, began to relax for the first time in years into the role of brother, son, and husband, instead of family diplomat. Through it all, Sarah found herself changing, too. The boundaries she'd once been afraid to hold became anchors, not walls. Her voice, once tentative and cautious, was now self-assured. She brought ideas to the family, advocated for her career, and even found humor in their cultural differences, sparking conversations rather than avoiding tension. Yet, Sarah never lost sight of the journey ahead. Reconciliation, she knew, was not a final destination, but an everyday practice, requiring patience, humility, and the willingness to begin again after setbacks. There were still days of misunderstanding
Yes, I
and
need help right
awkwardness,
away. It's an
times
emergency.
when old patterns threatened to resurface. But now,
Everyone all right?
there was a commitment on all
Oh,
sides
what
to
is it?
pause, reflect, and choose honesty. 6 months later, on the first windy evening of spring, Sarah watched the Tran family gather outside for their annual garden planting. Evelyn, dirt smudged on her cheek, handed Chloe a tray of marigolds. Emily rolled her eyes, but laughed as Michael sang off key,
We are here.
poking fun at everyone. Sarah smiled, heart calm and open. She felt herself not just accepted, but cherished. Later that night, as she sat beside Michael, beneath the blooming magnolia tree, he squeezed her hand and said softly, "You coming into this family changed everything for
Our
all of
traditions,
us.
they
But
are
what I
broken
love
now.
most is how it changed you too." Sarah thought of all that
I
had
told
been
you
lost
everything. I don't know what else
and
you want
found
from me.
in their shared hardship. The gift of forgiveness, the relief of truth, the hope that comes from choosing family again and again. "I'm not the same person I
Just
was,"
listen.
she whispered. "But I think that's a good thing." Together, they watched the porch lights flicker on and listened to the sound of family around them. The turbulent past had become seed for the future,
So,
a new
Emily,
beginning,
are you ready to talk now?
imperfect but
We are here to
undeniably
help.
their own. And so,
I want to go.
beneath the gentle arms of spring, life unfolded onward, stitched together by acceptance, forgiveness, and the courage to begin anew.